Hello, my name is Jessica Campbell, and for the first lesson plan of the semester, I worked with a 5th grade student on modeling the division of fractions as it was in the area of need of growth for that specific student. This particular student had mastered the idea of a fraction being part of a whole and the addition and subtraction of fractions in general. Also, the student understood the difference between fractions with different denominators. However, the student became more confused when the teacher began to cover the units on multiplication and division of fractions. My mentor teacher asked if I would specifically work one-on-one with the student on the division of fractions, as that was what they were currently working on in class. I had 3 main focus areas for this lesson. I wanted to help the student learn how to model the division of fractions using the stacked bar method in order to not only find the solution, but to also understand the answer in a logical way. I wanted the student to truly understand what it means to divide one fraction by groups of another. I also wanted to go over the method taught in the class, the keep, change, flip strategy, in order to reinforce what they are learning in class. I wanted the student to use the keep, flip, change equation strategy as a way to check their answers after working on the modeling strategy. They should conceptually understand what is being done in the problem before simply memorizing the way to change the equation to get the answer. My plan of action for this lesson plan was to discuss prior knowledge of the meaning of division, go over the anchor chart I made in order to do this, work on the worksheet using manipulatives with the student, and then discuss the answers verbally and how they solved them. Since Valentine's Day was coming up, I wanted to make the activity connected to the holiday in some way in order to make it more engaging. I brought in different types of hard candies for them to choose from, which they also got to eat after. This was a mini anchor chart I made to explain dividing fractions to this particular student and what would we be focusing on that day. I modeled the way to use the stacked bar method and the keep, change, flip strategy using the equation. I used this Valentine's Day worksheet and a variety of hard candies in this lesson. I use these tools as a way to engage the student in a fun and interactive way, as well as a way to represent the fractions. The student loved picking your candies and getting to eat them after the problems were all solved. These are pictures of 2 of the 4 problems that the student completed with this activity. As you can see, she did the model first, where she also used the manipulatives as a way to represent the fractions, and specifically the grouping on the bottom. She also circled the groups of fractions on the bottom and said how many there were. She then did the keep, change, flip method with the equation at the top to check her work. After we did this activity, she verbally discussed with me what each problem was asking and what the answer meant. The student began by coloring in the first fraction and then drew the line to show how much of the second fraction model she needed to shade in also. The student then decided to use the candies. She used one color for the first fraction and a different one for the second. She counted the candies as the groupings. She also wrote numbers underneath the groupings and circled them. The student drew the models first and then implemented the keep, change, flip equation strategy as a means of checking her work. One common error the student had when beginning working with these problems was labeling the model. On one of the problems, the student had begun by marking one part of each fraction on the top and the bottom model. This is incorrect, as the first should model the fraction, but the second model should have parts shaded in that represent how many groups are being made by the division. At the start of the lesson, she also had difficulty describing conceptually the meaning of the problem. The student at first seemed to struggle with understanding the meaning behind dividing fractions, how the solution to the problems were bigger than the fractions themselves. For example, she struggled with the idea of how 1/2 divided by 1/4 would equal 2, as 2 is a bigger whole number than 1/2 and 1/4. But after practicing making the models, the process became more clear of what the act of dividing was actually doing to the fractions. The next step in instruction would be to follow up with more practice and to see how she has progressed. I would reassess her knowledge on dividing fractions and see if we needed to go back over any key areas of the mini lesson. The next step in the instruction will also be to cover now what it means to divide mixed number fractions. Thank you for listening to my presentation.